As springtime is here, you're probably starting to think a little bit about your flower beds and gardening outside and all the things that you do every year to freshen up your yard. One thing I want you to really consider is a pollinator garden. Pollinator plants are critical to healthy habitats. And so today we're going to take a minute and we're going to talk about pollinator gardens. So it really doesn't matter if you have a balcony, if you have acres of land, or just a backyard. You can create a pollinator garden that will be beneficial and help the environment. So the first thing that you need to consider is your location and your soil. Most pollinator plants are going to want full sun. There are some that do well in part sun, but majority of them prefer full sun, as well as those pollinators like butterflies and bees. They like to bask in the sun. So you're going to want a sunny location for your pollinator garden. Secondly, you're going to want to consider what kind of soil you have. Is your soil wet and clay-like, or is it sandy, and does it drain well? Those kind of things. So that way it'll help you choose the proper pollinator plants for your area. Next year in our growing season here at the Bloomery in 2024, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about native plants, providing them for our customers, and we want to encourage you to use native plants in your area as much as you can. So what is a native plant? A native plant is a plant that's just like it says, it's native to your area. It can survive in your location and thrive there, and it's naturally from that type of environment or area. When you're planting native plants for your pollinator garden, you can't just rely on zones like we live in zone 6B, because growing zones are based on temperature, like minimum and maximum temperatures. So for example, in our zone 6B, the minimum temperature that we usually have is -5, 0 to -5 at the most. And that kind of lets us know that any plants that are going to be perennial here can't survive below that. Or if it's an annual in some places and a perennial in some, that's going to let us know those minimum and maximum temperatures. What you need to look at if you're trying to plant native plants for your area are ecoregions. Ecoregions have similar temperature, geology, soils, wildlife, plants, and they're a better resource for figuring out plants that are native to your area. In fact, the EPA has a website that has those maps already on there for you, where you can click on your region and see all of that information. The National Wildlife Federation has a great source for you. If you go onto their website, you can type in your zip code and it will bring up a list of native plants for your area. Coneflowers, bee balm, and milkweed are very common native plants that people are already familiar with that are great pollinators. If you want your pollinator garden to be something that you don't have to seed every year or redo, then you need to focus on perennials. Always make sure that you're buying things that are free of pesticides, because you don't want to harm those pollinators as they come to your garden. Pollinators need nectar all season long, starting in the early spring to the late fall. So you're going to want to plant plants that bloom at varying times. That way there's nectar available for them all year. So typically, seeds need to be sown in fall or late winter so that they have time to germinate and for your garden to grow. Purchasing established plants at a local nursery is also a great option. Just be sure to check your average last and first frost dates, and that way you can plan what flowers, what plants are going to bloom at the times that you need them to be and not die from frost. You can use a raised bed. You can use really anything to create a pollinator garden. I've seen people grow them in little grow bags and they just wanted one on their balcony. I've seen people use raised beds, and I've seen people sow a whole acre of seed for pollinator gardens. Really, anything you do will help. If you're going to grow a pollinator garden in the ground, all you're going to need to do is remove the grass, turn that soil, and then sow your seeds or put your plants into the ground. Be sure to add compost, because compost is going to be beneficial. It's not harmful to the pollinators, and it's going to help you have your best, healthiest garden. Sunflowers take a couple of seasons before producing, like some forms of milkweed. So be sure that you keep that in mind, that just because you plant it or seed it, it may not produce those blooms until a couple of seasons later. Pollinator gardens are so important because here in the United States, over 100 U.S. grown crops rely on pollinators. In fact, honeybees, butterflies, hummingbirds, all of those are so critical in our production of food. It's our job to try to help take care of our environment, and part of that is taking care of those pollinators.